everyone, and welcome to Covenant Calendar Club. We're so blessed that you're here. We pray that you would be blessed by the truth that comes out of the mouth of our teachers this day, and we give him the praise and the glory for it. If you would like to connect with us and the conversations that take place after we go through our study, please feel free to visit studythecalendar.com, and you can get started right there. So with that said, before we begin, we'd like to give you a warm welcome and just shout out and say, shall we, everyone? Unmute our mics.
Give it to the
one. And with that greeting, we're going to go ahead and turn the computer over to Tim and Jeanette, and we'll get started.
Okay, here we go. This is an interesting study. I'm looking forward to doing this one. We hear about this text time and time again. Well, what does Nehemiah say? Nehemiah says this, Nehemiah says that. And we hear that Nehemiah says that sunset starts the day. We hear that over and over and over. Well, let's see what it really does say. First, I want to make a special welcome to each and every one that are here tonight, and I hope you get a great blessing out of this. Okay, Nehemiah. There are 4 popular scriptures used to teach how to be keeping the Sabbath from sunset to sunset. Yes, there are 4 very popular scriptures that are referred to all the time. And the first one is Genesis 1, verse 5, the B portion. Then number 2, Leviticus 23:32, C. Number 3, John 20, verse 1. And for sure, study Nehemiah 13:19. This is the one we're going to be looking at tonight. This is the one we hear so much of that everybody reverts back to this verse. Well, we're going to dig into it tonight. What was the purpose of the call of Nehemiah? To inform the people of a sunset Sabbath? And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut. Nehemiah 13:19. No, Nehemiah does not say that the gates will be closed at sunset. Nehemiah's command closes the gate on sunset to sunset Sabbaths, and I'm looking forward to showing you how. In this picture, beautiful picture on the ocean, this is your Erev twilight. This is a twilight mixture above the water. And the question I have for you is, where is the visible sun located? Is the sun in the sky? Is there direct sunlight in the sky of the twilight? No. When it's twilight, there is no sunshine, no direct light, I should say, in the sky. Here's the verse of Nehemiah again. We're going to read it from Bishop's 1568 version. And when the ports of Jerusalem began to be dark in the evening before the Sabbath, I commanded to shut the gates and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should be no burden brought in on the Sabbath day. If we look at the top again, there's 3 very strong clues. Began to be dark in the evening. That evening word tells us the exact timing. That's your twilight mixture. And Nehemiah tells us it was before the Sabbath. Interesting. Nehemiah 13:15-22 contains a very interesting message that clearly reveals exactly when the 24-hour cycle does not start. This particular selection of verses is perpetually cited in an attempt to prove the 24-hour cycle starts at sunset. With reference to the sun having direct rays of light in the sky, the question becomes, what specific time frame does Nehemiah's documented Erev, the evening, fulfill when Yahuwah's 24 or within Yahuwah's 24-hour period? When is it? More questions for thought. Does Nehemiah 13:19 really expose what is claimed, that sunset starts every Sabbath? Will Nehemiah 13:19 prove sunset is Yahuwah's intended design for the start of his 24-hour cycle from creation? Does the twilight mixture of light and darkness arrive before the sunset? I'm going to read that one more time because this is a very, very important question. Does the twilight mixture of light and darkness arrive before the sunset? What do the scriptures indicate about the time frame for closing the gates of the cities? And the two questions that we need very defined answers for are, is the phrase, as it began to be dark, specifically identifying the enlarging of shadows from direct sunlight before sunset? And I cannot tell you how many times that I have been told this, that began to be dark. Oh, that just means the shadows were getting larger, longer. That's what I've been told. We're going to be looking at that. Or was, as it began to be dark, an actual absence of direct sunlight after sunset? This study will make very certain that you clearly understand the difference of meaning between these two questions. There are only two locations of this word, salal, translated as getting dark in the scripture. So let's look at some definitions. Salal, H6751. And because Strong's is so popular, let's begin there. H6751, Salal, the primitive root identical with 6749 through the idea of hovering over. And that's to shade, as twilight or an opaque object. And the KJV uses it as begin to be dark and shadowing. Salal, H6749, primitive root. To tumble down, settle by a waving motion, and sink. And we can compare these definitions to H6750 and 6751. Interesting that one, settle by a waving motion and sink. Keep that in mind. Salal, H6750, a primitive root, rather identical with 6749 through the idea of vibration, to tinkle, i.e. rattle together, as the ears reddening with shame, or teeth chattering with fear, quiver and tingle. That's from Strong's. How about Gesenius in his Hebrew Chaldee lexicon? Salal, to be rolled down, to roll oneself. Gesenius then references Judges 7:13 and the round cake of barley bread, which rolled down the slope in the Midianites' dream. Gesenius continues, the verb occurs once in Exodus 15:10. They are rolled down like lead, to be hid, to disappear. The Arabic is to perish, to be hid, to disappear. And number 4, pass, to be buried, all from the idea of tumbling downwards. And I specifically highlighted that word downwards, because when we hear about the shadows overtaking the ground, overtaking the area, I should say, I would ask you, are those shadows going up, or are the shadows as far down as they can? What is it that is coming on a downward motion? The question now is, speaking of the darkness mentioned in Nehemiah 13:19, can we see a connection of meaning in this specific darkness making a downward course to ground level? Or was this darkness from a physical obstruction, shadows, already on the ground and rising? The definitions do not say anything about this darkness rising. It seems that it's always on a downward motion. Was the darkness of Nehemiah tumbling down a slope? Where was this darkness originating from? Was this darkness progressively being pressed downwards? If so, could it be a celestial event caused the downward force? And here's a Hebrew lexicon by J. Parkhurst from 1773. You'll notice it's only a two-letter word. It's a two-letter root. Zal, to shade, shadow, overshadow, and shelter. Number one, to overshadow. It occurs not as a verb in cal in this sense, but as a noun, zal, shade, and shadow. Now I'm going to go over to the box on the right-hand side. Note, Parkhurst indicates clearly that this word can indicate a shadowing from a physical blockage of light. But if we look closely, in the blue box, we do not see any clue of Nehemiah's documentation there. But what about the next part of his writings? Now let's have a look at this blue box on the left side. Shade, shelter, protection as of a house, or of a tree, or of a mountain, or of a gourd. And those are physical obstructions to light. And they will cause a shadow. So what else did Parkhurst have to say? Salal, to be overshadowed, occurs in Nehemiah 13:19, where the English translation is began to be dark. Parkhurst indicates clearly that in Nehemiah's application, the physical darkness was not derived from a physical obstruction to the sunlight. Instead, Parkhurst declares the darkness of Nehemiah 13:19 as an all-enveloping